Thank you and good evening. Lead me from the unreal to the real. Lead me from darkness to light. Lead me from death to immortality. The preceding quote is from the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Now, ever since man crawled out of the primordial slime some countless millennia ago, the greatest minds have searched for a definitive explanation of the nature of reality. A recent issue of Philosophy Now magazine ventilated the subject in their question of the month, asking readers to proffer their input on what is the nature of reality. And here follows a collection of snippets to this central philosophical question. We need to tell the difference between hard ground and marsh that only looks hard. We need to know whether something is a bear or only a child with a bearskin rug over its head. We have evolved to tell the real from the false. However, injure the brain and the victim may lose their sense of reality. And when you have influenza, the familiar world can seem unreal. The real is the genuine, the reliable, what I can safely lean on. It is akin to truthful, valuable, even delightful. Its opposite is not illusion, but the fake, the counterfeit, that which cannot be trusted and has no cash value. Theater, television, paintings, and literature deal in illusion, but can be real in the sense that they nurture and enlarge us and help us to make sense of experience. And that is from a gentleman living in the illustrious county of Nottinghamshire. Now, in discussing the nature of reality, Joe Moore from California asked, we must distinguish between physical reality and the immaterial or non-physical reality. Physical reality is that which is constrained by physics or physical laws. Immaterial reality, on the other hand, pertains to what is not constrained by physical laws, concepts such as character and the mind. Plato's forms the realm of gods and spirits. This is the country about which we speak. If physical reality is all that is real, then what is the relationship of immaterial concepts, such as character, the good and morals, to this physical reality? And a gentleman from Florida comments, one thing that everyone agrees on, whether they be idealists, materialists, dualists, is that there is sense to our question. Another thing all these views share is that we all share the same reality. For example, for Berkeley, the nature of my reality and your reality is the same. It's all constructed on mind-dependent ideas. And we have a gentleman from the state of Indiana that puts forward the following view. Reality is the independent nature and existence of everything knowable, whether it is knowable by logical inference, empirical observation, or some other form of experience. Consider Kant's idea of the thing in itself, that aspect of existence always outside our perceptions of it. In Kant's view, we can never truly know reality in itself, what he called the noumenal world, because we are limited to our mind's imposition of fixed categories of knowledge upon our perceptions of it. And this is giving us what Kant would call phenomenal knowledge. So it would seem we are forever cut off from reality as it is in itself, that is, distinct from our mind's apprehension of it. And we have a gentleman from Australia putting forward these views. What we know of the world, we can only know through language, and our language is subject to change. So too is our reality. When Harvey discovered that blood circulates, he did not discover red and white corpuscles or plasma. But though corpuscles and plasma existed as part of the perceived world, they were not realized. They held no place as conceptual elements of reality. Realization is an active discovery governed by language use. For example, New Guinea tribesmen, who have only two basic colors, light and dark, have a very different apprehension of reality to us. They live in the same world we do, and they're capable of receiving the same impressions, but their reality is different from Europeans, as their language use obliges them to divide the world into different categories. And then one might ask, how does reality appear to us? What are the circumstances that could cause one's reality to be different from another's? People who have never seen can have their own sense of reality, which may be vastly different to that of a sighted person. They may have an internal non-visual visualization of bodily form, for example, which, if drawn or created, could be completely different from what is normally visually perceived. And how different would an insect or animal's perception of reality be to ours? A fly, for example, will have a distorted, to us, representation of its visual stimuli, caused by the need for the fly to be aware of different aspects of its surroundings. In a dream state, situations often occur which seem absurd when awake. Therefore, we seem to have a dual existence when awake. The subconscious state can seem as real as the waking state to a person who is dreaming or having a nightmare. How often is it that you wake and then go over your dream to realize that some of the things you were doing are impossible? Or are they? Alternate realities can now be induced by wearing computerized headsets, which can place a person inside a virtual reality. As graphics become more sophisticated, will this visualization always be distinguishable from actual reality? Reality is a simulation, so Justin Holm from Surrey tells us. In a very real way, we live in a reality like that portrayed by the Matrix film. All the sensory information you have about the world, according to our best scientific understanding, comes to you as electrical impulses. Your brain uses this information to produce a highly elaborate simulation. Take a fighter pilot as an example. If she looks out the window at 700 miles per hour, all she may see is a mist of darkness obscured blur whizzing past her window. If she looks down at her instruments, however, she is provided with a much more useful reality simulation. A radar screen tells her where she is in the world and what is coming up far beyond her real vision. A topographical display and night vision goggles help her to see the ground she is flying over. Our normal simulation of reality aids us in the same way. Yes, we do live in a simulation, but it is not a lesser reality. It is an enhanced reality. Problems only come about if we, as the pilot, for example, start to think that the radar screen or the night vision goggles are the only true way to see the world, and confuse our representation of reality with reality itself. Now, from the perspective of modern physics, the chairs we use are not solid at all, but are comprised mostly of space. In consequence, we not only sit down rather more cautiously, but have become really quite relaxed with the notion that our day-to-day constructions of reality may be largely illusory, varying not only from person to person, but from one era and culture to another, and most notably between species. Plato's cave allegory would not get him onto any chat shows today. In fact, it may not even have been big news way back in 400 BC. The trouble is, he fudged the issue because the reflections in the cave were distortions of real people carrying their various burdens past the mouth of the cave. By contrast, Heraclitus, a couple of centuries earlier, was making the more challenging suggestion that everything is flux, nothing permanently is. There are no beings at the cave mouth. And what we think of as things, as stable objects, are really in constant transition. They are processes. Ourselves are the same. So you might ask, well, what did Plato believe was the ultimate nature of reality? Well, the answer is, he believed that phenomena are fragile and weak forms of reality. They don't really represent an object's true essence. Plato believed that there was a higher realm of existence, accessible only through using your intellect to go beyond your senses. The universal forms exist in this higher realm. And then you might ask, well, what is appearance and reality in philosophy? Well, this concept usually implies an opposition between the perception of a thing and its objective reality. Similarly, Plato identified appearance with opinion and reality with truth. And then you may well ask, well, what is the meaning of appearance and reality? Well, they both, or should I say appearance versus reality, is one of the most common themes used in literature today and has been explored in many ways. It's a broad topic, which means something different to everyone. Phaedrus, the famous Roman poet, said, "Things are not always as they seem. The first appearance deceives many." Well, what are Plato's three levels of reality? In his dialogues, he presented a theory of the three levels, one of which we live in and are aware of with the senses. The first level of reality contains the forms. The reality itself, though, is completely impervious to time and will never change. And then if we turn to theosophy and its take on this vast subject, we read in Blavatsky's Secret Doctrine under the subject of one absolute. There is one absolute reality which antecedes all manifested conditioned being. This infinite and eternal cause, dimly formulated in the unconscious and unknowable of current European philosophy, is the rootless root of all that was, is, or ever shall be. It is, of course, the devoid of all attributes and is essentially without any relation to manifested finite beings. It is rather beingness than being, and is beyond all thought or speculation. And then moving from reality to illusion. What is the concept of illusion? Well, the psychological take on this is defined as a process involving an interaction of logical and empirical considerations. Common usage suggests that an illusion is a discrepancy between one's awareness and some stimulus. On this subject of illusion, there isn't one unified theory, but rather a strain of thought that has recurred many times and in many different forms in the worlds of philosophy. Some of the most notable versions, as mentioned earlier, are found in Plato, who viewed the ordinary material world as an imperfect copy or reflection of a more true reality composed of ideal elements. In Bishop Berkeley's claim that the entire world is contained in the mind of God, and then we have Descartes in his Meditations, where he considers and discards the notion that the sensible world is an illusion created by a malign demon. There are also elements of this point of view in Hindu and Buddhist philosophy, as well as in the Taoist writings of Lao Tzu and Zhuangzi. Zhuangzi, or Zhuangzhao, was one of the most significant interpreters of Taoism. His classic work, the Zhuangzi, is considered one of the definitive texts of Taoism and is thought to be more comprehensive than the Tao Te Ching, which is attributed to Lao Tzu, the first philosopher of Taoism. Zhuangzi's teachings also exerted a great influence on the development of Chinese Buddhism. The complete relativity of his perspective is forcefully expressed in one of the better passages of the Zhuangzi. Once I, Zhuangzhao, dreamed that I was a butterfly. And was happy as a butterfly. I was conscious that I was quite pleased with myself, but I did not know that I was Zhao. Suddenly I awoke, and there I was, visibly Zhao. I do not know whether it was Zhao dreaming that he was a butterfly or the butterfly dreaming that it was Zhao. Between Zhao and the butterfly, there must be some distinction. This is called the transformation of things. And more recently, variants of this idea formed the nucleus for the films Inception and The Matrix. Inception was released in the United Kingdom in 2010 and stars Leonardo DiCaprio, who plays a thief with the rare ability to enter people's dreams and steal secrets from their subconscious. The Matrix, which appeared in 1999, asks this leading question: how would you know the difference between the dream world and the real world if you didn't wake from the dream? Is life real or an illusion? Late in the 21st century, the theme has it that man develops artificial intelligence, referred simply in the film as the machines. The machines take control of Earth. Man fights back, but in the resulting power struggle, the world is decimated. And guess what? The machines win. The entirety of Advaita Vedanta is about the view that no two things exist. Nothing is really real from an absolute point of view. And of course, there are other non-dualist teachings outside of Advaita that point to the same. For example, Buddhism takes the perspective that the arising of things is founded in delusions, which result from cravings for things to be other than they are, which is founded in misconceiving the nature of our world. the fundamental metaphor of Buddhism, to attain awakening or enlightenment, references leaving a sleeping state. In fact, the noticed American psychiatrist David Hawkins, who died a few years ago, devoted more than 50 years of his life to study of Buddhism and Advaita. In one of his more pithy observations, he remarked that 80% of the human race is completely asleep, and the other 20% is only awake some of the time, something on which to ponder. And then we have, in this discourse between Hermes Trismegistus and his pupil Tatios, the following, dealing with the question of reality. Hermes states that reality is not upon the earth, my son, and it cannot be thereon. Nothing on earth is real. There are only appearances. He, namely man, is not real, my son, as man. The real consists solely in itself and remains what it is. Man is transient. Therefore, he is not real. He is but an appearance. An appearance is the supreme illusion. Tatius asks, then the celestial bodies themselves are not real, my father, since they also vary. To which Trismegistus answers, that which is subject to birth and to change is not real. There is in them a certain falsity, seeing that they too are variable. To which Tatius responds, and what then is primordial reality? To which Hermes replies, that which is one and alone, O Tatius, that which is not made of matter nor in any body, which has neither color nor form, which changes not nor is transmitted, but which always is. And this is quite consistent with the Vedantic teaching. The leading thought is occult, and many are the passages in the Hermetic fragments that belong bodily to the secret doctrine. In Indian philosophy, Maya is described as a spiritual concept, connoting that which exists, but which is constantly changing and thus is spiritually unreal. And the power or the principle that conceals the true character of spiritual reality. And then we move to the concept of time. And we read this piece on time and consciousness from volume 1 of The Secret Doctrine. Time was not, for it lay asleep in the infinite bosom of duration. Time is only an illusion, produced by the succession of our states of consciousness as we travel through eternal duration, and it does not exist where no consciousness exists in which the illusion can be produced, but lies asleep. The present is only a mathematical line which divides that part of eternal duration, which we call the future, from that part which we call the past. Nothing on earth has real duration, for nothing remains without change, or the same for the billionth part of a second. And the sensation we have of the actuality of the division of time, known as the present, comes from the blurring of that momentary glimpse or succession of glimpses of things that our senses give us, as those things pass from the region of ideals, which we call the future, to the region of memories that we name the past. In the same way, we experience a sense of duration in the case of the instantaneous electric spark, by reason of the blurred and continuing impression on the retina, the real person or thing does not consist solely of what is seen at any particular moment, but is composed of the sum of all of its various and changing conditions, from its appearance in the material form to its disappearance from the earth. It is these sum totals that exist from eternity in the future and pass by degrees through matter to exist for eternity in the past. And then we move on to this question of absolute. Hence, non-being is absolute being in esoteric philosophy. In the tenets of the latter, even Adi Buddha, the first or primeval wisdom, is, while manifested in one sense, an illusion. Maya, since all the gods, including Brahma, have to die at the end of the age of Brahma, the abstraction called Parabrahm alone, whether we call it Ein Sof or Herbert Spencer's unknowable being. This is the one absolute reality. The one secondless existence is Advaita, without a second, and all the rest is Maya, teaches the Advaita philosophy. And we read more about Maya or illusion from Blavatsky's Secret Doctrine. Maya or an illusion is an element which enters into all finite things. For everything that exists has only a relative, not an absolute reality. Since the appearance which the hidden noumenon assumes for any observer depends upon his power of cognition. To the untrained eye of the savage, a painting is at first an unmeaning confusion of streaks and daubs of color, while an educated eye sees instantly a face or a landscape. Nothing is permanent except the one hidden absolute existence, which contains in itself the noumena of all realities. The existences belonging to every plane of being, up to the highest dhyana chohans, are in degree of the nature of shadows cast by a magic lantern or on a colorless screen. But all things are relatively real, for the cognizer himself or herself is also a reflection, and the things cognized are therefore as real to him as himself. Whatever reality things possess must be looked for in them, before or after they've passed like a flash through the material world. But we cannot cognize any such existence directly, so long as we have sense instruments which bring only material existence into the fields of our consciousness. Whatever plane our consciousness may be acting in, both we and the things belonging to that plane are, for the time being, our only realities. As we rise in the scale of development, we perceive that during the stages through which we have passed, we mistook shadows for realities, and the upward progress of the ego is a series of progressive awakenings, each advance bringing with it the idea that now, at last, we have reached reality, but only when we have reached absolute consciousness and blended our own with it, shall we be free from the delusions produced by Maya. And as our illustrious co-founder of the Theosophical Society, Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, reminds us, the reader must bear in mind that according to our teaching, which regards this phenomenal universe as a great illusion, the nearer a body is to the unknown substance, the more it approaches reality, as being removed the farther from this world of Maya. Well, after all of that, I hope you're clearer at least to what you are not. So we can begin discovery of what is the essence of being human, and what signposts are displayed along the path to unlocking the truths of existence and travel to that place beyond illusion. The Chinese once had an expression which never dates, and that is, we are living in interesting times. And you don't need the brains of a prime minister, present or past, to figure out and note that Britain is awash with turmoil as I speak. Unprecedented increase in the cost of fuel has forced up the price of food and other staples, driving millions into poverty. Inflation is now about 10%, and further increases in the bank lending rate will push even more desperate people into desperate straits. Industrial unrest as a consequence of the cost of living crisis is also at the highest in decades. And then we have the war in Ukraine, resulting in death and misery for many in that country. Not that war is anything new. Apparently, there have been only 200 years in the last 2,000 years when no major conflict was brewing. Conflict is unfortunately the norm for mankind. And as the epic poem, the Mahabharata, records, but this is written over 2,000 years ago, and it records the struggles between two groups of cousins in the Kurukshetra war. But in spite of all of these pressing concerns, for many, none of this seems apparently to matter and interrupt their daily interests. As my illustrious chair today has said in one of his excellent books, Cycles of Eternity, all about the subject glamour, we live in a glitzy and often amoral world, oozing questionable values and hollow goals, and which is largely ruled by the false gods of money and materialism. The threadbare celebrity culture of today, which preoccupies so many people, has totally debased the ideals of outstanding achievement, especially since most so-called celebrities have achieved nothing except inflation of their own egos. More than ever, the youth of today are seduced by brands and the need to have the most expensive trainers, jogging trousers, smartphones, and cosmetics as their schoolmates, or face impossible derision. No teenager wants to stand out as being different. I should know, as I was bullied incessantly as a child at school for my buck teeth and curly hair. A recent survey of wealth has indicated that the 25 largest families in the world have amassed fortunes in the trillions. At the top of the totem pole are the family controlling Walmart, until recently the owner of Asda in Britain, whose wealth is increasing by millions every second, and yet the majority of their staff are on less than 10 British pounds an hour. Wouldn't you all like to own one of these? I'm sure you would. And there's a number of people that have several of them. Many of the large and successful families that we've mentioned are involved in selling luxury goods like perfume, handbags, watches, and exotic spirits. A real coup for the corporate world was the bright idea some 25 years ago to sell t-shirts with the brand's name on the outside. All of that free advertising. It is reckoned that the top 10% in Britain control perhaps 80 or 90% of all wealth here. A large slice of that income and profit is made on the backs of what you could effectively call slave labor. And many of these multinational companies do not pay their fair share of tax, instead hiring an army of solicitors and accountants to practice tax avoidance schemes. and cite their offices outside of the United Kingdom. A lot of the missing tax take could be used to build more schools and hospitals and support those who are genuinely unable to work, such as persons suffering from medical conditions like multiple sclerosis. You would have thought that between them, the mandarins in Whitehall in Britain would have found a way to make it more advantageous to be in employment than to draw benefits. But one government after another has failed to sort the problem. I'm seriously wondering whether they really want to sort the problem, or are there simply too many vested interests to maintain the status quo? There is the expression that work maketh the man, and I'm inclined to believe it. Everyone needs to feel valued. The money is useful, and a certain amount will find its way back to the treasury anyways. But the most important thing is that employment gives one dignity, a purpose for living. If you haven't got that, you've got nothing at all. It's a bit like love. Everyone needs it. Another matter of grave concern to everyone, rich or poor, is the environment. The excellent wildlife programs of everyone's favorite grandfather, in Britain at least, Sir David Attenborough, have brought into sharp focus the calamity facing us all. If we do something serious now to improve our major ecosystems, every year, dozens of species of animals or plants disappear from our planet, at least partially down to the practices that are detrimental to the environment. No doubt you have all heard of the lingering deaths of fish who have ingested plastic in our oceans, something for which every one of us must take responsibility. And in London alone, too many children are now dying because of air pollution, largely because diesel has been the fuel of choice for drivers of cars and lorries. And there was a story on Google News not that long ago about the disappearing ice cap of Greenland. It was reported that a chunk of ice the size of France had melted into the adjoining seas, which no doubt will impact on the coastlines of neighboring countries, with possible calamitous results. There is the fear that many of the low-lying islands in the Pacific Ocean, which flood annually, will permanently drop the sea level and have to be abandoned. There are many parts of the east of England which already suffer from coastal erosion on a scale which in the next decade could render such places uninhabitable. And it's not just coastlines being affected. River flooding recently in Yorkshire and Derbyshire on a scale not previously experienced, and in the West Country as well in the last few years, should give cause for concern. More money will have to be pumped into flood prevention schemes, but there is a limit to just how much cash is available. But it is not all doom and gloom. No one could have imagined even 25 years ago that most people would own or could afford to own a mobile phone. Much more than simply something to telephone your friends or businesses, it's a portable computer, allowing you the ability to quickly access useful information on the web, pay bills, watch films, and even take photographs. All a bit like magic, wouldn't you say? And we can now travel to other countries quickly by plane or train at a fraction of the cost in real terms just a few years ago, and with a frequency that is unprecedented. And while many may bemoan the so-called failure in the main of the United Nations to keep peace in the world, along with the Red Cross and other similarly altruistic organizations, they have improved the lot of the dispossessed from areas of war and victims of natural disasters like earthquakes, volcanoes, tsunamis, and floods. And there is much more cooperation now between nation states in so many fields, in agriculture, science, and culture, just to mention three. The plan on the face of it to leave the EU by Britain might be seen as a backward step, as it could well cut off the flow of talented individuals working in our research laboratories, to mention just one area. One more statistic to take on board, as Canadians are the art of the unimportant down to a fine art. And that is, no other country has produced as many Nobel Prize winners as the UK. But of course, many of those awarded these prizes had emigrated here in the first place. One, though, should not forget the initiatives of individuals themselves. After the worst to date tidal wave over 10 years ago in the Indian Ocean, the British government pledged to match pound for pound the donations of the man in the street. In the end, the Treasury had to dig deeper than planned because of the unexpected generosity of the great British public. As a nation, we now donate 0.7% of our budget to funding foreign aid, which puts us high on the list of countries in the world. People wanting to set up new businesses but not having enough collateral to get backing from conventional lenders have found unexpected allies with the general public through crowdfunding, and in some cases have raised millions of pounds in just a few hours. Obviously, optimism is not dead in all quarters of our society. Loneliness is one of the most distressing problems of the modern world, especially amongst the so-called developed economies. I remember a 5-part series on television a few years ago, covering citizens in London, New York, Mexico City, Mumbai, and Tokyo. The salient message was the place with the most crime, Mexico City, seemed to ironically be the happiest place to live of the 5. At the other end of the spectrum, Tokyo, with all its wealth, seemed to suffer the most alienation. In one case, an individual went on the website to pay for a friend to visit. And we are talking about a purely platonic exchange. Now, that is a great pity. Talk about alienation. And just a few weeks ago, I saw a story on regional television in East Anglia. And while loneliness in theory affects the elderly more than the young, youth are not immune from the problem. And one might say, certainly during the COVID-19 lockdowns, the youth suffered the most of any age group. A novel program has been developed in the east of England that pairs pensioners with students for informal discussions about everything that takes their fancy, whether it be education, sports, politics, spirituality, etc. And from the interviews conducted so far, both youth and elderly seem very content with the results. Watch this space. What we really are talking about is being connected, and not in the mobile phone sense of the term. And just because, as I am, retired, it's not the end of the world. Yes, the aches and pains might become more frequent and possibly more focused. However, you might now find you actually have the time to do things that being employed prevented you from doing, like long distance travel, or even visiting your friends and relatives. This is also a time to give voluntarily to organizations requiring such help, like charity shops, hospitals, etc. They say that people who are helping others rarely feel lonely. For a start, you've got out of the house and are meeting other people. We are all after all, social animals. Above all, as Theosophy would suggest, we are on a journey of self-discovery. Through study and reflection, one comes to realize that we are all part of this one great existence, which some call God. And the reason for existence is to know thyself. As the oracle at Delphi in ancient Greece affirmed, when the glamour of the outside world loses its sheen, you start to understand that the kingdom of God is within, and every one of us is part of one great family. We are here both to learn and teach, and in the process, we progress together. We have lived many times before and will return to this or another plane of manifestation to work out incomplete areas of our makeup. And through the agency of karma, we will iron out any deficiencies in future lives. And this we will do with others that we have known before. No doubt I shall meet again my wife, who I sadly lost at the age of just 57. Hopefully in the next life, she will again be my wife and not the milkman. And by then, I trust I will have transcended my fiery temper, which has been one of my major Achilles heels in this life. We all learn from our mistakes. As one of my mentors, the great theosophical leader Ianthe Hoskins once put it to me after I'd obviously screwed up some project, Colyn, those who make no mistakes make nothing. And all the kingdoms of nature are on the same track as well. There is no such thing as dead matter. Consciousness is everywhere, from a grain of sand to a galaxy, as London's favorite mystic, William Blake, would have put it. Man is self-conscious. I think, therefore I am. In time, other creatures in whom the monad is already present will enter the human kingdom. The door is currently closed, but will open eventually. I cannot help but be amazed at the cleverness of the creatures we see around us. I say to my girlfriend that far more entertaining than the programs we watch on the goggle box are the antics of the squirrels in the garden. Flying from tree to tree, shimming up a pole to get at nuts, and then scurrying onto the ground to bury their booty in the lawn. The birds fly backwards and forwards from our garden to their homes in the trees, to steal bits from the hanging baskets to use in their nests. To say that they lack intelligence is simply madness. And then there is the cooperation in the ant colony, watching how they build their homes in leaves, coaxing a grub to secrete a fluid which acts like a glue to piece together unconnected leaves, and building a bridge of ants over which others can travel on the backs, as it were, to build their homes. We have a similar level of cooperation within our own bodies, which are like a solar system of sorts. When one organ is suffering, the others come to its rescue to fight off disease and take up the slack. I remember the case of Helen Keller, the American in the previous century, who was both blind and deaf, but still carved out a successful career. If she could do it with all those challenges, so can the next person. Just think for a moment, in countries and families, if countries and families could practice such cooperation on the same scale, it would truly be a wonderful world. But of course, as the Russian writer Alexander Solzhenitsyn once remarked, as long as man is at war with himself, there will not be peace in the world. Everything is a reflection. What we do not like in others, whether they're individuals or nations, is usually because there is something within them that reminds us of something in ourselves that is incomplete. And as Lao Tzu, the Chinese philosopher, once said, "He who knows others is wise. He who knows himself is enlightened." Mankind is very young in the ultimate scheme of things. It is only about 19 million years ago since mind was first developed. And as far as the globes in this chain of manifestation are concerned, we've only just turned the corner, shall we say, just past 6:30 p.m. on the clock on this involutionary path upwards. In this period described as the Kali Yuga, or Iron Age, progress will be slow. Against such resistance, progress will be difficult. But anything gained will be worth far more than the so-called more enlightened ages to follow in the bronze, silver, and gold epochs. And in the end, whatever happens, do not give up, as if you could. As the famous lyrics from the Nat King Cole song would have it, when things go wrong, pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and start all over again. And just to end this lecture, I would like to repeat the famous quote I began. Lead me from the unreal to the real. Lead me from darkness to light. Lead me from death to immortality. Thank you for your attention.